Kamala Harris, after a demanding series of meetings, boarded a private jet in hopes of escaping to the Maldives for a peaceful retreat. The plane's luxurious interior, with plush leather seats and soft ambient lighting, promised a rare moment of rest. However, as Kamala settled in and tried to relax, she began to sense an undercurrent of discomfort in the cabin. A flight attendant, Emily, seemed to treat Kamala differently than the other passengers. Kamala noticed Emily's hesitation, an unusual shift in demeanor that caught her attention, but she chose not to dwell on it. Please subscribe my channel for more justice and inspiring stories. The flight continued, and Kamala tried to unwind by reading her book, but the discomfort lingered. Another passenger, Sarah, a lawyer, leaned over and quietly warned Kamala that Emily had been acting strangely toward her. Sarah's observations confirmed what Kamala had already suspected. Emily's behavior was deliberate, even hostile. Kamala, however, remained composed and calm, choosing to ignore the subtle tension and continue with her peaceful journey. As the flight progressed, Emily's attitude grew more overtly unfriendly. She repeatedly treated Kamala with condescension, offering service that felt passive-aggressive, and even making thinly veiled comments that hinted at discrimination. Kamala, though aware of the shift in behavior, kept her responses measured and professional. She noticed Emily's demeanor toward her was different from how she interacted with other passengers, a fact that didn't escape Sarah's notice either. Sarah, who was attuned to issues of injustice, became increasingly vocal in her disapproval of Emily's actions, sensing that something more sinister was at play. The situation escalated when Emily approached Kamala with an official-looking file, demanding that Kamala provide her booking documents again. Emily's voice, though polite, carried an unmistakable edge, and she made sure the other passengers could hear her. "Not everyone belongs everywhere," she said in a tone that dripped with disdain. Sarah immediately stood up, asserting that Emily's actions were discriminatory and that Kamala's rights were being violated. She made it clear that Emily had no authority to treat Kamala this way, further stirring the tension in the cabin. Emily, undeterred, claimed that her actions were for the safety of the flight, but the passengers were beginning to doubt her motives. A few murmurs spread through the cabin, and an older passenger even voiced his opinion that Emily was overstepping. The tension was palpable, and Emily, feeling cornered, retreated to the galley. The pilot's voice soon came over the intercom, announcing an emergency landing for technical reasons. Kamala couldn't shake the suspicion that this sudden change in plans was linked to the unfolding drama. As the plane began its descent, Sarah continued to express her concern for Kamala, but Kamala, maintaining her composure, reassured her that she was fine and that she would handle whatever came next. But the tension only grew as Emily reappeared, now with a new level of hostility in her eyes. She informed Kamala that she would be required to disembark immediately upon landing. Her words cut through the cabin, creating a charged silence. Sarah once again stood up to challenge Emily, accusing her of abuse of power and discrimination. The passengers, once silent, began murmuring in agreement, some even voicing their disapproval of Emily's actions. When the plane landed at a small isolated airport, Emily stood at the door, her cold gaze following Kamala as she prepared to leave the plane. Kamala gathered her belongings, her mind racing with anger and determination. Sarah, not willing to let the injustice go unnoticed, approached Kamala and offered her support, stating she would testify on her behalf. Kamala smiled gratefully, silently vowing not to let this incident slide. As she stepped off the plane, she was fully aware that this wasn't just a random act of hostility. It was a calculated attack, and she was determined to expose the truth. Standing on the tarmac, Kamala watched as the plane slowly taxied away, leaving her alone in the quiet airport. But inside, her resolve was firm. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a fight against the injustice she had endured. Kamala stood still, the silence around her only heightening her sense of purpose. She wasn't going to stay silent. She would take action, no matter what it took. As the plane disappeared into the distance, Kamala's mind was already turning, strategizing her next move. This was not a trip for leisure. It had become a fight for justice. Kamala Harris stood alone on the scorching tarmac, her face stung by the heat. The airport around her was eerily desolate. No staff, no vehicles, just a solitary run-down building off in the distance. The feeling of isolation and humiliation enveloped her as she pulled her suitcase behind her, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. As she approached the building, she saw its neglected exterior, cracked walls and dusty windows. Pushing open the door, she was greeted by an equally abandoned interior, worn plastic chairs, a reception desk covered in cobwebs, and scattered papers littering the floor. Desperation settled in as Kamala searched the room for a phone or any means of communication. After a few minutes of rummaging through the debris, she found an old phone on the reception desk. With a flicker of hope, she lifted the receiver, only to be met with a disheartening hum of static. The line was disconnected. Kamala placed the receiver back and sat down, her hands resting on her suitcase, her gaze lost in the void. Her phone, too, offered no help. There was no service. Kamala squinted at the screen, wondering if the lack of signal was simply due to the remoteness of the area, or if someone was intentionally blocking it. The sinking feeling in her chest grew stronger as she realized she had no way to reach out. As the sun began to set, the once golden glow of daylight faded into encroaching darkness. Kamala knew she couldn't stay in this isolated airport much longer. There was no way to know what danger might lurk after nightfall. Rising to her feet, she grabbed her suitcase and ventured outside again, this time heading toward a narrow path that led away from the airport. The forest ahead loomed dark and inviting, and Kamala switched on a flashlight she had found in the abandoned office. As she walked along the dry ground, the sound of her footsteps blended with the rustling of leaves. A breeze whispered through the trees, creating the unnerving sense of being watched. Kamala's pulse quickened as she glanced behind her, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary, just darkness and shadows. Still, the unsettling feeling of being followed lingered, and when she heard faint footsteps behind her about 20 minutes into her walk, her heart skipped a beat. She stopped and turned, shining her flashlight into the empty darkness, but there was nothing, just the sound of the wind and rustling branches. Kamala forced herself to stay calm and resumed her slow pace, now hyper-aware of every sound. Eventually, the faint glow of lights appeared in the distance. Kamala's heart surged with relief as she saw the outline of small houses at the edge of the forest. As she approached, the sounds of life reached her. Laughter, children playing, and the gentle hum of folk songs carried on the wind. She exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her journey lift for the moment. The villagers, curious but warm, gathered around her as she entered the village. A tall man, kind-faced and welcoming, stepped forward and addressed her. "Ma'am, you look like you've had a tough journey. Is everything all right?" Kamala managed a faint smile, though exhaustion was written across her face. "I was left stranded at the nearby airport. I need to contact my office, but there's no phone service there," she explained. The man nodded sympathetically. "The signal here isn't great either, but you're welcome to rest for the night. We'll help you in the morning." Kamala followed him to a small house where the villagers brought her food and water. An elderly woman, likely the community caregiver, gently treated the minor scratches on Kamala's legs, and a young girl no older than 12 approached her with wide, eager eyes. "You're Kamala Harris, aren't you?" the girl asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "I've seen you on TV. You're amazing. I want to grow up and be just like you." Kamala smiled warmly, her heart softened by the girl's admiration. "Thank you, Asha, but you're already strong. I believe you can do anything you set your mind to." Asha's eyes gleamed with determination as she held Kamala's hand tightly. "But you're here alone. Did something bad happen?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Kamala nodded gently, her smile faltering for a moment. "Yes, Asha, but I'm okay. I believe that the truth always prevails, and I won't let anyone get away with doing wrong without facing the consequences." Asha's eyes shone with determination, and Kamala's heart swelled with pride for the young girl's strength. That night, as Kamala lay in a simple bed in the small village house, the soft glow of an oil lamp calmed her, but her mind was racing. The events of the day, the hostility from Emily on the plane, the suspicious emergency landing, and the strange circumstances that had led her to this isolated village, left her with a nagging sense that something far bigger was at play. Kamala understood this wasn't just a disrupted trip, it was a battle against injustice, and she was determined to uncover the truth. The night outside was filled with the sounds of crickets and the gentle rustling of the wind, but inside Kamala's heart, the peace was fleeting. She knew the real fight was yet to come. As she closed her eyes, a firm line of resolve pressed her lips together. They think they can humiliate me without consequence, but I'll show them. No one does wrong and escapes accountability. The next morning, the village awoke to the serene sounds of roosters crowing, children laughing, and soft conversations. Kamala rose early, still weary from the exhausting journey, but her eyes glowed with determination. This wasn't just a disrupted trip, it was an opportunity to stand up against the injustice she had endured. The villagers, with their warmth and hospitality, had prepared breakfast for her, and Kamala enjoyed the simple meal, grateful for their kindness. As she ate, Jamal, the village chief, approached with important news. "We managed to contact someone in a nearby town," he said. "They can help you get to a place with phone service. We can take you there whenever you're ready." Kamala smiled, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Jamal. Your kindness is something I'll never forget." While waiting, Kamala spent time talking with the villagers. Asha, the young girl, stood nearby, her excitement barely contained. "Are you really Kamala Harris?" Asha asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "I saw you on TV. I want to grow up and be strong like you." Kamala placed a gentle hand on Asha's shoulder, her gaze soft. "You already are strong, Asha. Don't ever forget that." The young girl's face lit up with admiration, and Kamala felt a deep sense of pride in knowing that her actions were inspiring the next generation to stand up for what was right. Asha's words had ignited something within Kamala. The young girl's unwavering belief in her strength and her ability to make a difference sparked a fire that burned brighter than ever. "You're already strong, Asha, and you can do anything if you believe in yourself." Asha's eyes gleamed with newfound determination, and her small fists clenched as though she were ready to take on the world. "What will you do next, Kamala?" Asha's voice was filled with trust and hope, a belief in Kamala's ability to overcome even the hardest challenges. Kamala took a deep breath, her gaze shifting toward the horizon, and with steady conviction she replied, "I'm going back home to make things right. No one has the right to treat anyone unfairly." Several hours later, Kamala arrived in a small town where, for the first time in what felt like days, she found a signal on her phone. Without wasting a moment, she dialed her office. Kevin, her assistant, picked up immediately, his voice a mix of relief and concern. "Kamala, you finally called. We've been worried sick since yesterday. What happened?" Kamala's voice was steady but filled with urgency. "I'll explain everything when I get back. Right now I need you to prepare for a press conference. This isn't just personal, it's a fight we can't afford to ignore." When Kamala finally arrived at a major airport in Washington, Kevin and her legal team were waiting. The car ride back to her office was tense, the air thick with frustration and resolve. Even Kevin, usually the calmest person in the room, couldn't hide his anger. "The airline issued a statement," Kevin said, his tone sharp with sarcasm. "They claim it was a routine safety decision by the flight crew." Kamala raised an eyebrow. "Do they think I'll fall for that empty excuse?" Kevin nodded. "We have evidence, witnesses. They can't hide forever." Kamala leaned back in her seat, her eyes burning with resolve. "Good. We won't let this fade away. This is our chance to speak up for those who can't." The next day, a major press conference was held outside Kamala's office. Reporters from all over the country gathered, their cameras trained on the podium. Kamala stepped out, exuding confidence despite the palpable indignation in her stance. In a dark suit, she stood tall, ready to confront the injustice that had been thrust upon her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kamala began, her voice ringing with conviction, "yesterday I experienced something no one, absolutely no one, should have to endure. On a flight to the Maldives, I was insulted, targeted, and ultimately removed from the plane without a valid reason." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd, making sure her words hit home. This was not just an act of discrimination. It was a symptom of a system that abuses its power, a system that believes it can act without consequence. Her words struck a chord, resonating powerfully with the public. The live-streamed press conference garnered millions of views within hours. The hashtag #JusticeForKamala began trending across social media, drawing attention not only from the public, but from political and media circles alike. Meanwhile, the airline hastily released another statement, denying responsibility and claiming that Emily, the flight attendant, had acted on her own. But this only fueled public outrage. Investigative journalists dug deeper and uncovered a startling truth. Emily had acted on orders from an airline executive, someone with political connections who had targeted Kamala. Kamala and her legal team seized this opportunity. They filed a lawsuit against the airline, alleging discrimination, harassment, and abuse of power. Sarah, the passenger who had stood up for Kamala and others, including the one who had recorded the incident, pledged to testify. "We're not suing just for my dignity," Kamala declared in an interview. "We're suing to ensure that no one else has to go through this." That evening, Kamala reviewed legal documents in her office when Kevin walked in, his face lit with excitement. "Kamala, we just received a major tip." He handed her a folder. "Another flight attendant from that flight has come forward. She claims Emily was acting on direct orders from higher-ups to have you removed." Kamala opened the folder and quickly skimmed through the details. "Which higher-up?" she asked, her voice steady. Kevin explained. According to her statement, it was an airline executive with political connections who didn't want you on that flight. Kamala set the folder down, her eyes cold with determination. "So, this isn't just discrimination. It's a conspiracy. And we're going to expose it." She stared out the window, her gaze unwavering. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but Kamala knew this fight wasn't just about her. It was about justice. "They think they can bury the truth, but I'll make sure the world sees it." The story of the incident on Kamala Harris's flight became the focal point of national attention. Every detail, the hostility from Emily, the humiliating way Kamala was forced off the plane, spread like wildfire across the country. The hashtag #JusticeForKamala became a symbol, not just of her fight, but of the fight against discrimination in all its forms. Kamala's legal team worked tirelessly, preparing every piece of evidence needed to confront one of the largest airlines in the world. The trial was scheduled for a drizzly morning, and Kamala arrived at the courthouse, calm but resolute. The crowd outside erupted into cheers as she stepped out of a sleek black car. Many held up signs with messages like "Justice for Kamala" and "End discrimination." Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every step she took. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Emily, the flight attendant, sat nervously on the defendant's side, accompanied by the airline's legal team. On Kamala's side, her legal team was impeccably prepared, with every document and piece of evidence organized and ready. Kamala's attorney, a renowned human rights lawyer, began the proceedings with a steady, powerful voice. "Your Honor, we are here today not just to restore the dignity of my client, Mrs. Kamala Harris, but to denounce a behavior that is utterly unacceptable in our society. Mrs. Harris, a woman who has dedicated her life to justice, was publicly humiliated on a flight. This incident not only disrespected her personally, but it also sent a harmful message about how we treat one another." The first piece of evidence was presented, a video recorded by a passenger, showing Emily using discriminatory language and forcibly removing Kamala from the plane. The courtroom fell silent as the video played on a large screen, Emily's voice clear and unmistakable. The airline's legal team tried to argue that Emily was simply performing her safety duties, but this defense quickly crumbled as witnesses testified. Sarah, the lawyer who had been seated next to Kamala, was the first to take the stand. Her voice was sharp with conviction. "I couldn't stay silent when I witnessed such behavior. It was blatant discrimination. It wasn't just directed at Kamala Harris. It's emblematic of how vulnerable people are often treated." Kamala Harris's legal battle against an airline became a turning point in her life and a broader movement against discrimination. The incident that sparked the case began when Kamala, a prominent public figure, was unjustly removed from a flight. A passenger who witnessed the event recorded it and testified, confirming that there was no reason for her removal. The most significant testimony, however, came from an unexpected source, another flight attendant who initially hesitated to speak out for fear of losing her job. Eventually, she revealed that an executive had given orders to handle Kamala, with another employee, Emily, simply following these instructions despite her own reservations. This revelation shifted the case from a personal issue to an orchestrated plan, adding credibility to Kamala's legal claims.